Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So yesterday I heard Jim Ratcliffe, who I've never heard of him before. I believe it might actually be Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He's apparently one of the biggest businessmen in the UK and has something to do with Manchester United. I only learned that from Sky News because otherwise I wouldn't have, if you'd shown a picture of him or even his name, I wouldn't have known who he was or what he did. But he came out with this statement with Ed Conway, Sky News person, saying that the UK's been colonised and talking about immigration and this, that and the other. I mean, what always strikes me with these things, and I've said this many times on The Pursuit of Truth, when you get people like this talking about immigration, this, that and the other. I mean, from my perspective, I believe the system, the way we live, is wrong. And as I often point out, intrinsic truth, one of the only intrinsic truths that tends to be ignored or not even thought about until you think about it and then you realise, oh yeah, the intrinsic truth is we're all human beings. I mean, to quote Shakespeare, isn't it? Do we not bleed the same colour or whatever, to paraphrase that. But we're all human beings. And this system that we live in is man-made. And we have brought money and systems and this, that and the other to constrain us or to develop us, or I don't know the reason really, because this is thousands of years ago, men who just wanted to own and possess. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that what gets me is that I don't know how his history is, but I mean, I'll get to that in a second, but all human beings, like most animals, don't stay in one place. They migrate. That's part of an animalistic trait, but it's also definitely part of humans. Humans didn't all, if, the history is that we either came from the area of Iran or Africa and we spread. We didn't all stay in the same place. Even now, we don't all stay in the same place, do we? We move around. That's just part of humanity. And then to sort of, and this is what I don't get, because the problem is that obviously the system that we live within is all about money, and that's the constraints, and that's why, and maybe space as well. I suspect there's enough food and space probably for all human beings to live nicely. The problem is that money causes a problem, and then these rich people often are the ones that like to complain about it. And you think, well, what have they got to complain about? They're making enough money, aren't they? But anyway, the fact is that history of Britain, I mean, this country is not, I mean, there seems to be this idea, is it almost, I don't like to use this phrase, but it came into my head of like Hitler and the Aryan race and that kind of purity. There's no such thing of any race. We mix around, what we consider English. I mean, if you look into it, or if you've done history, you will know about the Normans, about the Romans, about the Huguenots, about Anglo-Saxons, all this stuff. Most of what he's defending, or these people defend when they talk about what's British, is German or Scandinavian or whichever country that came and invaded and left behind these things that we adopted, even language and stuff. And not only that, when you look at our understanding of sciences, and numbers, isn't it? The zero comes from the Hindu script. A lot of science came from the Arab lands. There's lots of different places. When you think about, even now in your own home, the technology, the AI stuff, the TVs, the Samsungs, the Sonys, the all these different companies, Mitsubishi, we are better together than apart. And just this idea, and I get it, he's thinking, because, I don't know, maybe he's not making so much profit. I don't know why it concerns him, because he and the thing is that also, according to the MP, he doesn't pay tax in this country. So if he loves this country so much, why is he not paying tax here? He's paying it in Monaco because it gets it cheaper. I mean, and apparently I did see, I didn't read it, but I heard that he apologised for his use of the word colonise. But I expect he doesn't actually I don't know what it is. What is the problem with certain people and their not wanting other people, other human beings, to be in their vicinity, to share? And this idea of like attacking welfare, you know, that, I mean, the thing is, it's like, I don't know, maybe there are people who find it difficult to work and are not working and could be working. I don't know. But I suspect majority are people who are disabled, who have disabling conditions that make it difficult for them to work, or impossible. And this attack on us actually looking after each other, that is what makes, that's what humane is. That's why we're called humans. And that's also forgotten. And it's just, I mean, like they were saying about tough decisions, doing what's right. Politicians should be doing that. Yeah, they should be. They should be getting rid of money. Because it doesn't take, you know, you don't need to be part of Mensa to realise the whole problem with our world is our system that we inherited from people who just wanted to be greedy and possessive, who wanted to cut up bits of land and make you work for them so that bosses like Jim Ratcliffe can be, you know, billionaires and the little people can get £12 an hour. You know, but not only that, not strip that away. Money itself is the problem because we have the resources, we have the manpower, woman power, human power, we have all the ingenuity, we have all the great ideas, we have the resources, the materials to do everything that we possibly could do, and we have the incentive because we're human beings. We love each other. We have that compassion of love, and what's stopping us and what the suffering is caused by is our need for money, and we don't need it anymore. Do we really need AI to come along and tell us that? Because that's what's going to happen in the future as AI develops and takes over from the jobs that we do. And then we think that, well, what are we going to do with all of our time? You know, as I mentioned, I think in the previous Pursuit of Truth. But anyway, I'm going to play you the Sky News thing. It's just, to me, it's like, I mean, if he did a DNA test, he'd probably find he's half, you know, he's got bits of German in him and this, that and the other. But maybe it's not the white element that he has a problem with. I don't know, not to cast aspersions, but I expect there are some people out there that are like that's what it's to do about. But the fact is that we are all human beings. When is that going to, you know, sink into everyone's head that talks about immigration, that talks about, you know, which football team you're going to support and all this kind of divisive stuff that is in our lives all the time, so much more these days. We are all human beings. Take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.
Now, our other top story. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, one of the richest men in the UK and part owner of Manchester United, owner of Ineos, has told Sky News that he thinks the UK has been colonised by immigrants and it's costing too much money. The Prime Minister demanded an apology, saying his comments were offensive and wrong. And the Manchester United Supporters Trust has also voiced concerns.
Now, he made these comments as part of a very wide-ranging and frank interview with Sky's Ed Conway. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, in that interview, also called for courage from politicians to make difficult but necessary decisions on issues like the rising welfare bill. He said we need somebody who's prepared to be unpopular for a period of time to get the big issues sorted out. Let's have a listen to Sir Jim talking to Ed.
If you really want to deal with the major issues of immigration, with people opting to take benefits rather than working for a living, if you want to deal with that, then you're going to have to do some things which are unpopular and show some courage.
And has this government done that?
No, I think they I don't know whether it's just the apparatus that hasn't allowed Keir to do it, or he's maybe too nice. He's a nice, I mean, I know Keir, he's a nice man, I like him, but it's a tough job, and I think you have to do some difficult things with the UK to get it back on track, because at the moment I don't think the economy is in a good. You can't afford. You can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK is being colonised. It's costing too much money. It will cause. It'll cause. Well, the UK is being colonised by immigrants, really, isn't it? I mean, the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020. Now it's 70 million. That's 12 million people.
You met recently with Nigel Farage, didn't you?
I did.
Do you think that they would be a good government if they were to win the next election?
I think Nigel is an intelligent man, and I think he's got good intentions, but in a way you could say exactly the same about Keir when Keir came in. But, I think it needs somebody who's prepared to be unpopular for a period of time to get the big issues sorted out, would be my view.
Well, Keir Starmer's responded to it. We also got a response this morning from the Justice Minister, Jake Richards, who said the Man U co-owner should keep his views to himself.
Yeah, I think that the language used around colonisation is ugly and actually quite offensive and frankly wrong.
Do you think it's racist?
The idea that we are, as a country, being taken over by people from abroad, I think is not right and is wrong, and I think I understand why many people would find it offensive. It's perfectly legitimate to raise concerns about immigration. That's why this government has a commitment to bring down levels of immigration and has already gone very far in bringing down levels of immigration from the 1 million net immigration high that we had under the Conservative government. But we do need to be careful about the language we use. And the fact that Jim Ratcliffe then went on to use statistics which were completely wrong, and also the context in which he moved to Monaco to avoid paying £4 billion of tax in this country, I think he should perhaps keep some of his views to himself on this.
Do you think saying that the UK has been colonised, do you think that's racist language?
Look, I just don't think it's very helpful, and I think it's offensive language.
Mari's here to discuss it a bit further with us. Clearly, the colonisation word was unnecessary and unacceptable, and he got some of the statistics wrong as well.
Yeah, he did. So I think it's important to correct the record in terms of what he said and actually the reality of the kind of makeup of the UK's population. So he had said that immigration had increased the population from 58 million to 70 million between 2020 and 2026. Now, the figures that we actually have are from the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, and actually from 2020 to 2024, which is the data that we do have, it went from 67 million to 70 million, so actually only 3 million rather than the 12 that was suggested. And the figure that perhaps he'd gotten confused with was the population was 58.9 million back in the year 2000, so 25 years ago. So it's important just to kind of establish that in terms of some of those figures not being accurate. But I think what's really interesting about what Jim Ratcliffe has said is I think it points to a changing of what people have started to feel is perhaps more mainstream and more acceptable to say, and it is to an extent a bit of a mirroring of, you have this kind of often on social media, this online belief or kind of theory called the Great Replacement, and it is mirroring some of the kind of rhetoric around the idea of Europeans being replaced as a population by immigrants, by brown people. And I think what's interesting is that theory has become a more mainstream ideology, especially on social media, and it is now being mirrored by people like Jim Ratcliffe, who have started to say these kinds of things. And as much as people might want to be shocked, I mean, Keir Starmer did a tweet where he said it was offensive and wrong. Britain is a proud, tolerant and diverse country. Jim Ratcliffe should apologise. But on the other hand, you have Nigel Farage, who has, rather than condemning it or calling it out as anything that's wrong, he said Britain has undergone unprecedented mass immigration that has changed the character of many areas in our country. Labour may try to ignore that, but reform won't, and really indicating that actually perhaps he agrees and perhaps he's got a point.
I mean, the other thing to say as well is I do think it's important to make the point that he's the co-owner of a football club, and for many people, these football teams are a great way of showing diverse races, backgrounds, nations coming together and playing as a team. And there'll be a lot of black, brown, white players in Manchester United who also feel offended by those comments. I did just want to ask, while we've got you as well, Mari, though, about his kind of wider point about political courage. Yeah. Because here, I think that some people, or a lot of people, might actually think he does have a point about, politicians being prepared to be unpopular to make decisions that they think are right or they know are right in the long-term future of the country.
Absolutely. And I think He's right, and he touches on a nerve that is there is an appetite for politicians that are willing to do things that might not be vote winners, but that could really kind of get the UK, especially the UK economy, out of the kind of hole that we've found ourselves in. You were talking about the GDP figures earlier this morning, disappointing once again. We are not getting the growth that we were promised by Labour, and perhaps Wes Streeting saying he was wrong, that they didn't have a growth strategy. Maybe he wasn't so wrong after all. I think the difficulty is that actually Jim Ratcliffe, he has a point that actually there is a point where people in this country feel that there isn't enough courage in politics, and to an extent that is why we are seeing Reform and Nigel Farage being so popular, and to an extent the Greens as well, because their ideas are more radical, more kind of ripping the plaster off, getting on with it, ripping up rules necessarily, and just doing what needs to be done. And people want to hear that kind of messaging. Now, people might say it's completely unrealistic once you actually get into government and have to deal with the civil service, but nonetheless, people like that kind of messaging. And I think the difficulty is we had a huge amount of that messaging from Labour in the election campaign around making tough decisions and doing what was right rather than what was easy. And in power, that hasn't really materialised into actually following through with a lot of those difficult decisions.
And forget exactly what the policies are. They pledged growth as their top agenda item. You see what policies would be popular? Growth. People's wages going up. And the data this morning, 0.1% for the fourth quarter. It's 2 quarters in a row where GDP per capita has declined. So,
if I honestly, in the space of this 1 week, how many times the government line, whether it's the Treasury or Number 10, whoever it is, has said the words, we are creating the conditions for growth, right? They keep talking about creating the conditions for growth rather than creating the growth. And that I've heard so many times this week from government already, and that is a concern.
We could just ban the word growth from all politicians talking about it.